This is Tim, and this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo. This week I'm talking with Wren McDonald, creator of the graphic novel Sparks, spelled SP4RX. The title character is a hacker for hire in the distant future. I had some questions about Sparks, and we also talked about his process, world building, and more. Plus, I asked some more questions that will only be available to Patreon contributors. More on that later in the show. We'll get to Wren in a minute. First, a reminder that you can help this podcast by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon and make that your bookmark for future purchases. We'll then get a percentage of what you spend. It costs you nothing extra and helps us cover web hosting and other costs of presenting this show every week. Okay, I'm talking with Wren McDonald in the New York area. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Okay. Are you originally from New York?
No, I'm originally from various states in the south of the United States. So I've lived in South Carolina and Florida mostly.
I see. Okay.
And I've been in New York for 2 years now.
I see. So why did you move? Just because that's the place for artists, or?
yeah. That's what I heard, so I thought I'd try it out. Yeah. No, but
Brooklyn,
actually,
right?
Yeah, I'm in Brooklyn.
Of course.
I do have friends here, and I do like the arts and comics scene here. And I had come up here multiple times while I was in school and everything. I just decided I really like New York, so I decided to move here.
I see. Did you go to any like comics art school somewhere, or?
I went to an art school in Sarasota, Florida called Ring Lane College of Art and Design. And I didn't do a comics specific program, but I did do an illustration specific program.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So what kind of comics did you read when you were growing up?
Oh, okay. Well, I guess the first comics that I remember really reading where I just had a pile of random comics that I had acquired. I'm not sure from where. I think from like free places here and there when I was like a young kid, like elementary school and stuff. And they were mostly like Marvel and DC stuff from like the 80s and 90s. Like I remember having Batman comics and Punisher comics. Those at least were the ones from that assorted pile that stood out to me. And I remembered enjoying them, but I was never like obsessed with them at all, I guess. But I guess shortly after, I don't know, I'm sure you're a bit older than me, but when I was in elementary school, we would get these Scholastic order forms.
Oh yeah, we did too.
Right.
And
yeah.
I'm sure I am older than you, but yes, that's been going on a long time.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I remember getting one of those, and there was a Dragon Ball Z Volume 1 manga or something you could order.
Okay.
And I was like, whoa, I can order comics at school. So yeah, I ordered that, and I loved it, and it was I guess so different from the Marvel and DC and mainstream comics, American comics that I had been exposed to. And shortly after, I subscribed to Shonen Jump, which was a monthly comics magazine published by Viz that had like One Piece and Naruto and Yu Yu Hakusho and a bunch of other ones. But I got really into that, and that kind of opened me up to the world of manga, I guess, which I was really into. And from that point, I guess, I remember in high school I found Akira by Katsuhiro Otomo in the school library, actually. And that really changed like what comics were to me, I think. And that had like a really big impact on me. And yeah, I guess from that point, I just got into other comics. I think also I guess this is also relevant. And then when I was in college, I got really into Mobius and Heavy Metal Magazine and all those like European, like French sci-fi guys from like the 70s and 80s. And yeah, and I guess that's the comics that I read growing up. Did I go too far?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
So when did you start kind of making your own?
So I guess in college, actually, because when I was a kid, I was always drawing, but I was always reading comics as well. But I don't know why I never really drew comics when I was a kid. I think maybe I thought it was too much work. Yeah. Because it is a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, yes.
But I think when I was in college, it just was like, okay, so now you have to do this, and I did. So.
I see. So what kind of comics were you making at first?
Just like short comics, like exercises. I did have actually a comics class, I think in senior year of college, that was taught by. I don't know if you know him, but he's a comics guy. His name is George Pratt, and he worked on some like Batman series and Enemy Ace and stuff, like in the 80s and 90s and stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, so I took like the comics course, and I was like, okay, so now I'm gonna learn how to do comics.
I see. So what kind of what stories were you doing? Because what you're doing now seems to be a lot of it's centered around technology, but
right. Well, I mean, I've always been like interested in stories that are science fiction related or about like technology in the modern world, and stuff like that. So I think that's just me trying to think about also what comics and movies and books and everything that interest me the most, and that's the type of comics that I want to make. So, for example, like the stuff that was really impactful on me was like Akira and Mobius and Heavy Metal Magazine and stuff like that. So I think I've always been making comics that are kind of in that vein.
I see. Okay. Now, Sparks just came out, and I guess Nobrow has put out at least one of your books before. How many books have you had published so far?
So Nobrow has also put out a short 24-page comic called Cyber Realm, which was kind of like a post-apocalyptic revenge story with robots and cyborgs. And then in addition to that, I also self-published my own mini-comics. I have a risograph copy machine, and I've printed 5 comics on that. I think they're all 12 pages each or something like that.
Okay, yeah, I was looking at the covers on your website, and it did look like most of these were from a risograph,
right,
other than Sparks and Cyber Realm.
Right.
Yeah, I see. So did you sell them at conventions then, or?
Yeah, I sell those online and at shows, and I think I really like doing the mini comics like that because there's not as much responsibility when you're only making a comic that's 12 pages. You don't have to worry about okay, so this is happening on this page. What's that going to mean by page 80 or something? And it's also a challenging and fun exercise. It's like working out for comics or something, And you can experiment with a mini comic too. And yeah, so it's not as much commitment, I guess. So yeah, I do a lot of the mini comics because I think it's fun, and I have the copy machine, so it's really easy to print them myself and stuff.
I see. So what kind of brought about Sparks? What inspired this particular book?
When I was thinking about, so I had done the Cyber Realm with No Brow, and that was a shorter comic, and they were kind of pushing me to do a bigger graphic novel. Because I was thinking like, oh, it's too scary. I don't know if I can do a book that big. But yeah, I was like, okay. So if I'm going to do it, I want to make the type of comic that I've always loved reading, I guess, which is like in the vein of science fiction and cyberpunk. So I was like, okay, let me make a book that's about cyberpunk, basically. Yeah, so I think that's what I did.
I see. Okay. Now, this story takes place in a city called Avalon. Is this supposed to be on Earth or a different planet, or is that even relevant and important to the story?
I think it doesn't matter. I guess, like, maybe it's on Earth, but I didn't... I mean, sure, it's probably on Earth because it's, like, humans and stuff. But I didn't really specify because I didn't want to bring in the politics of, like, different countries and governments and stuff, and I just kind of wanted to focus on this world of the city of Avalon, I think.
I see.
Yeah.
And now I gathered, especially from the very first page, that Avalon, like the kind of strata of society are physically stratified, and the higher levels are the higher class levels. Is that right?
Yeah, right.
Okay. But and then they're not supposed to move between the levels because he moves. Sparks, the character, moves to a lower level, I think, at the beginning of the book, but then he's like in danger of getting arrested.
Right. Well, he actually lives in the sub-levels, which I was thinking that's like basically the world that we live in today, and so in the future everyone's just built above that, and so the city of Avalon uses the sub-levels as basically like a trash zone, a garbage zone, and an off-limit zone where they could just like throw away the toxic materials and stuff. So no living organisms are allowed there for safety, and also, so you don't see what's happening in the sub-levels. So the only restricted level is the sub-levels. But as far as the other levels go, that's the level where you live. But citizens are able to go from place to place, but it's like, oh, can you afford to visit the next level, or are you going to the next level to work there? And stuff like that, So for example, someone from the low level might go and work in an upper level as like a servant to a high level household or something.
Okay, and so now Sparks is going to a lower level in that first scene, isn't he?
Right. Well, he actually lives in the sub level because he likes to live off the grid because he's so anti-authority.
Okay. But then I'm so why is he there in trouble then?
Oh, okay. So he lives in the sub level, but it's like he's found his own nook. So when he travels between levels, he's in danger of the robots that just monitor the sub level to make sure there's no organisms. So when he's in transit from his like the nook where he lives, the like hovel to like the elevator that he can hack to go to the next level, he can be spotted by one of those robots. So he has to like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Okay. Yeah. So, but it seemed there's kind of a dream he has early on. And I gathered that is he kind of worried about being subsumed by machines? I mean, in this world, like these kind of robotic implants are becoming like a really commonplace thing, and people's bodies are part machine in a lot of cases. And he has a left arm that's all like robotic. Right. But is he kind of worried about like a machine just kind of swallowing him up, or?
I think that's what I was trying to apply, that maybe subconsciously he's worried about that. like he would dream about that, but in his day-to-day life, he would never address the fact that he is worried or thinks about that.
Well, I mean, his whole kind of livelihood is from technology, as kind of a hacker or pirate or something.
Right.
Right. But yeah, I mean, the whole book seems to be largely about kind of the interaction between machines and humans.
Right. Yes, but as is all cyberpunk, because I think like I think that I really wanted to make a book about the genre of cyberpunk.
Okay.
So it's like there's so many different scenes that are just references to like, oh, here's from this movie Total Recall, or here's this scene from Akira or something. So it's kind of like looking back on the cyberpunk movement, which I think is still relevant, but it's also really cheesy and funny. So it's maybe like, oh, here's the genre of cyberpunk through the eyes of 2016.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's not a comedy book, but there were certainly some comedic touches in it, like where there's a cat that's batting at that floating robot head,
Right.
or they're the dancing sexy girl robots, and there's the guy watching with his tongue hanging out. I mean, these kinds of things. Are you envisioning these as you're writing, or do they just kind of come to you when you're drawing, or where do those come from?
So where do I get the ideas for the funny stuff?
Or what do I want to say? At what point do you decide to put those in your process of making the comic?
That's a good question. I think it maybe depends from panel to panel. Like I may have a joke when I'm spending time on the script that I'll be sure to put in there. But I think for the most part, like the two examples that you mentioned, the guy with his tongue hanging out when he's at the robot strip club, or the cat batting the robot, I think those all came as I was drawing. And I think it is because I just want to like make funny exaggerations, because also my drawings are like, they're kind of goofy anyway. They're pretty cartoony. And I think I like maybe playing up the goofiness or the funniness, so as to like maybe just to drop hints, like not to take it too seriously. Because like you said, it's not a funny book, but I want you to be able to look at it with a smile, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the art style wouldn't be out of place in a comedy.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's not really a comedy, and it doesn't take long until you figure that out. People start dying and stuff like that.
Right.
So, and yeah, I was surprised if this is supposed to be the future. There are a lot of people who are smoking.
Yeah. Well,
cigarettes have kind of made a comeback.
Well, that's again just like a reference to like the future of the past. Like all the 80s or 90s action movies that I like a lot. They're always smoking, you know, and because it's like quote unquote cool for the action hero to smoke. So yeah, that's why everyone is smoking. It's like a reference to the kind of nostalgia science fiction and action movies.
I see. So even though it takes place in the future, there's nostalgia about the future. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Right. So it's
the
like,
past's view of the future.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Now, some of the characters, some of the people in the story had this Elpis technology implanted in their brains. Right. And it starts to control them, or they're able to be controlled. Right. Are they then kind of unrecoverable? Well, the reason I ask is because like Sparks and the Wraith rebels seem to just kind of take them out rather than trying to rescue them.
Yeah, that's kind of funny. So basically, once one of these citizens volunteered to undergo the welfare program of Elpis, it literally is an implant in their brain, which so it basically functions as an organ in their body. So yeah, you can't just remove it, otherwise they would die. So you can only destroy them now. Yeah.
I see. And that E thing implanted in their forehead, it comes out kind of easily. They get punched and it goes flying out.
Yeah, it pops like a champagne cork. Yeah.
Now, there's that outdated robot running around, the OBD 0.3,
Right.
and he does play some important roles in the story, but I felt like, was he also supposed to be symbolic of something?
Not intentionally.
Okay.
But was there something that you found he was a metaphor for or something?
Not necessarily. I mean, I suppose I could figure something out. That it was like something about the past's presence in the present or something.
Yeah, not intentionally, but yeah, sure.
Okay. And the ending, I'm not going to spoil anything, but it felt like it was a prelude to something more. Is there a sequel in the works, or
There could be. I'm not presently working on a sequel, but I'm also not against continuing this story because I really like this world and I like these characters and drawing these things. So I would love to work on another book like sometime in the future. But yeah, there's no concrete plans or anything of that happening. So.
Okay, but yeah, there's plenty to work with there if you decide to keep going.
I do have ideas.
It feels kind of like the end of A New Hope, where it could be the end, but there's enough loose ends dangling that you could do more.
Well, that was the idea when I was closing this up. Is I wanted to make something that felt like it was coming to a close, but it was open-ended enough where I could go on or continue if I wanted to in the future.
Okay, yeah, Darth Vader got away, so...
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that you have some full-page panels that sometimes they work as establishing shots, but other times they felt more like they were just character portraits. What was your thought about including those?
Yeah, so that is actually something that I've seen in manga that I like a lot. Because manga stories are normally serialized in monthly or weekly magazines, and when they have cover pages in the monthly or weekly magazine.
Yeah, okay.
And so sometimes when they make the collected edition or the book, they'll still have those splash pages throughout the book. So I created a splash page to mark basically the beginning of each chapter or section.
I see. Okay, that's the next week's episode. Okay.
Oh wait, what is next week's episode?
Well, I mean, now we're into the following week's episode, as if it were being published in a weekly manga magazine.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I see. Okay, so it's kind of the cover. Okay.
Right.
Coming up, Wren's process, his excellent world building in Sparks, and more. And if you're a Patreon contributor to Deconstructing Comics, you can hear more of my talk with Wren McDonald, where he talks about his worst freelancing experience, a kind of comic he would like to do but hasn't yet, work-life balance, and more. To become a patron, head over to patreon.com/deconcomics.
I'm Batman.
And I'm Robin.
This is Tim.
And this is Paul.
To the Bat Polls! The iTunes reviews are in on To the Bat Polls podcast. These guys do a good job, writes Acello. Who knew that the Batman TV show was such a wellspring of insight into Hollywood trivia, 60s counterculture, sexual mores, and even musical analysis? The Young brothers know their stuff, says Professor Allen. It is a great mix of nostalgia, analysis, and fun. Highly recommended. You've heard the reviews, now try it for yourself. New episodes on the first, third, and fifth Thursdays of the month on iTunes or Stitcher, or at tothebatpolls.libsyn.com.
Batman, the answer to a policeman's prayer.
For nostalgia, analysis, and fun, it's...
To the bat balls.
So, what's your process? Like, do you write out a full script, or with stage directions, everything, or do you kind of sketch it, or how do you kind of put your story together?
Well, when I worked on Sparks, I worked a little differently from the way that I was used to working with the mini comics, because the way that I was used to working, because when you're doing a 12 to 24 page comic, it's easy to go ahead and rough out the whole thing in one go. Just spend a day or two or three and kind of map the whole thing out. But when I was sitting down to start Sparks, I was thinking, that's a lot of work and it's going to take me a long time. And then if I rough out 120 pages and then I go through the process of drawing it and I get to like the final chapter or whatever, I might hate what I sketched out like was a year ago, you know? So the way I worked on Sparks is I created like an outline, like just words and maybe like character designs and stuff. And I separated it into chapters because that made it easier for me to get my head around doing a longer book. So I basically thought about it as if I was making, I think there's like 9 chapters or sections. So as if I was making 9 short stories. Mm-hmm. So I would sit down every time I started each section and I would rough out like really small, like thumbnail size, like the pages are maybe like 2 by 3 inches, like super small. Mm-hmm. And I would just sketch it basically like stick figures just so I know what's happening. Like this character is running or something. Mm-hmm. And so I would do that for the whole chapter, so maybe like 12 pages. And then each day I would sit down and draw a page. And on that day, that's when I would write out the dialogue and obviously draw what was actually going to be happening on the page. So I just knew that I had to get, okay, so today's page I have to get from point A to point B. And I would just sit down and do it that way.
Okay. Yeah. And now are you using paper or are you drawing like digital?
No, yeah, this is all drawn on paper with pen. I use those, I think, hold on, let me see what brand it is so I can say. Yeah, it's like a Canson, like a manga pad or something, so it has like the blue outline around the edges. I feel like it's like marketed to maybe middle schoolers or something, but it feels like cool to draw on those pages. So yeah, I use that paper and I just use like the Copic multiliners and stuff to draw with. And I put down a non-photo blue pencil and then I ink over it. And then I scan in the pages and all the color is done digitally in Photoshop.
I see. Okay. And I noticed on your site, I guess you're doing a lot of illustration work also, like freelance?
Yeah, I do a lot of editorial stuff. That's kind of my day job. I guess that's like the part of my job that pays the bills.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and that's really fun too. And it's nice to be able to have the editorial stuff and the comic stuff because both of them are really thinking with 2 different parts of my brain. So it's nice to go back and forth. You know, if I've been drawing comics for a week, it's nice to like switch to the other side where I have to draw something that I wouldn't normally draw or wouldn't normally want to draw and kind of think about problem solving and how can I communicate an idea in a single image, you know.
Yeah. Right, yeah. If you don't have the luxury of being able to draw a series of images, it can be a different challenge.
Exactly, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and also, when I'm doing the editorial stuff, I'm always working with an art director. So it's more of like a collaboration because the comics, working with Nobrow, they were really hands off, which was great. So I could really just draw and draw whatever I wanted to draw and tell whatever story I wanted to tell, and then they would look at it at the end. And so when I'm doing the editorial illustration, it's working with the art director every step of the way, and I have to provide multiple sketches, and then I'll do a final, and there will probably be revisions and stuff like that. So it's a very different way of working.
Mm-hmm. So how did you get hooked up with No Brow?
I think when I graduated from college, they have like an email submission form on their website, and I just emailed them. And I think that they had maybe seen my work around online, and they were like, okay, well, we have this project, which is actually the Cyber Realm book that I did is part of a project that they do called the 17 by 23 series, and it basically just gives them the opportunity to work with like young artists that haven't really published anything or done big comics, and it's like they can take a chance, and then it gives the artist the opportunity to publish like a short comic too. So
okay.
Yeah, so, well, actually it's funny because I was actually I had this pitch and I was going to do it myself because I was doing TCAF that year, and I was like, okay, so I have all these layouts and it's 24 pages and I'm going to print it up Rizzo on the Resograph, and they were like, okay, well, we have this project and it's 24 pages, and I was like, oh, maybe I should send them these layouts. And so the next day I sent them the layouts for Cyber Realm, and they were like, oh, wow, okay, let's do it. So.
I see. Great. So, like, how many conventions a year are you doing?
This year I've done a lot, I think, to promote Sparks. But before that, I would do maybe one a year or two a year. I like to try and do the ones in New York because I'm here, and I like to show up to the local community events, Mm-hmm. But yeah, this year I've been doing a lot to promote Sparks because I'm still not sure about like the whole release date thing. It's kind of complicated with this book. It officially came out on the 18th, but I think it was out earlier in the UK because No Brow is based in the UK.
I see. And
so we had advanced copies. So we had like a very small amount of like advanced copies. So we went around to Mice Expo and SPX and Comic Arts Brooklyn with the advanced copies. So we did an advanced copy signing tour.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. You weren't at MoCA. Because I was at MoCA, but I don't remember seeing you there. So.
I didn't have a table. I didn't have a table last year at MoCA. Well, that would have been before the pre-release.
Yeah, it was March or April.
Right. Yeah, because I started doing the pre-release book tour in November, I think.
Okay.
But yeah, I did do a quick signing at No Brow's table for Cyber Realm last year, but I was only there for one day for like an hour. So.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, but I'm hoping to do it. I'm hoping to do it this year. So.
Okay. So now you be doing the conventions. Then you've been like at No Brow's table?
Yeah. It kind of depends. I've been at No Brow's table, like at SPX. I was at No Brow's table for an hour at a time, both days, signing Sparks, and then. When I did Mice Expo, I was also at their table, but I was there for the entire time with my own mini comics and stuff too. And then at Comic Arts Brooklyn, I had my own table, and then No Brow was also there separately, but also together.
Like side by side?
Side by side. Yeah, so it just depends on the show.
Okay. Well, so as far as like tabling by yourself, do you have any like useful convention strategies to share, like how to get people to come to your table?
I guess I've learned that standing up goes a long way. I think it's something that people don't really think about, but I've found that when I'm standing up, I'll have a lot more interactions with people at the show, and people maybe feel more ready to approach a table that they're not sure about if the person is standing and they look friendly rather than like sitting down on their phone or something, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, a lot of times at conventions you'll see the artists sitting there behind their table drawing, and it's
yeah,
like, yeah, we know that you draw, but yeah, I mean, they don't seem ready to engage with people who are coming by.
right. Yeah, I mean, I feel like doing comics and doing the mini comic and indie scene, you do kind of have to put yourself out there and hustle a little bit. It is also a business, you know, so you have to wheel and deal and rub elbows.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of people involved in comics, myself included, are not very outgoing, so
Right.
and
No,
not
yeah.
very business inclined, so
Right.
it's not the easiest thing for us. So, how do you think the comics industry will change in the next 5 years?
In the next 5 years, oh, I don't know. That's a good question. Man, I needed this question beforehand so I could think about it more.
Sorry.
um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Hopefully, good. I'm seeing a lot of like young artists putting stuff out there, you know, and I would like to see more of that, I guess. I see a lot more emphasis being placed on like the publication, the book as an object, you know, which I do like that a lot as well, because I always hate it when I get like a book that I know and that's maybe like translated into English and the publisher put no time or money into the actual printing, and so it just looks like so bad compared to like the original. I have a few volumes of manga that are actually in Japanese, and the design is so beautiful, and they have like a dust jacket, and it's like hardback with embossing or spot UV or something, or felting on the cover, and I'm like, what? This is so amazing. And then I'll go find like the English edition, and it's like it's printed from like a copy of a copy of a copy, and like the quality is super horrible. And yeah, so I feel like I'm seeing a lot more emphasis being placed on the printing of books, which I think is like a really good direction to go, in a direction that I feel like a lot of booksellers have to go in a day and age where it's so much easier and cheaper just to look at or read the content on the screen, you know. So basically, just treating the book as like a collectible, I guess.
Yeah, presentation's important.
Right.
What could be done in comics that hasn't been done yet? Sorry, this is another question. I should have given you a warning here.
I don't know. I feel like I can't answer that question. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry that I can't really answer that question, but that's a really big question, and I don't know. I think we have to, I guess, pay attention to like people that are doing new things with comics that haven't been done yet, you know, instead of just like theorizing, I guess, because I don't know, like what are the inventions of the future is like a similar question, I think. I don't know.
Well, so I guess there are a lot of ways that comics could change. I mean, certainly moving towards digital, it's already happening.
Right.
But you're talking about also how the printing of the paper ones is changing. There's more emphasis on presentation maybe than there has been in the past.
Right.
Certainly compared to the old days when it was, you know, the crappy newsprint with the
Right.
inferior printing quality.
Right.
But also, I guess, like the kinds of stories that are being told. I mean, I think we're already seeing, you know, even, you know, in mainstream comics, it's not nearly as much as focused on superheroes as it used to be.
Oh, yeah. I'm not really sure. I don't really pay much attention to much mainstream comics. So that's cool, though, I guess.
Okay. So what have you learned about making comics since you started?
I've learned that it takes a lot of time, and if for me at least, if I don't put a lot of time into setting it up, then I'll end up with a poor product, I think. So I guess just, yeah, planning it out is key for me. And yeah, just kind of like getting my process and my practice down, especially because I work from home, from my bedroom, basically. And yeah, being a freelancer, you have to be motivated, you know, because sometimes, some days it's difficult to get out of bed and sit down and just draw pictures.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, I think like also with comics, like draw something that you love drawing or that you're interested in, because otherwise, one is what's the point, and two is it's gonna suck because it's gonna take forever and you're gonna be doing something that you hate for a long time.
Right. Yeah. Don't get into it if you don't enjoy it.
Yeah, or I guess if you're not like passionate about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's not always fun, right? When there's a deadline coming up or something.
Yeah, I mean, some days you just don't want to draw comics. But yeah, you got to get it done. And especially like for Sparks, the deadline was coming up, and I think for the final the final month and a half, I was drawing from the time I woke up till I went to bed with like no breaks. It was like the most intense month and a half ever. I think I was working in shifts from like 11 a.m. to 1 a.m. every day or something.
Wow.
And yeah, because I normally, like comfortably, I was doing 1 page a day. But when the deadline was coming up, I was having to do 2 pages a day or maybe more. And then, yeah, so I finished all the drawing, and then I finished the drawing for the entire book before adding any of the tone or color. So I finished the drawing for the entire book, and then I think I had a month. And so I guess it's 2 months, actually, because the month after I finished the drawings, I was doing the same exact thing, but with all the color, because I had to finish all the color for the entire book in a month. So.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, luckily, I chose to work with the limited color palette and everything on this book, so that made things easier, I think.
That's interesting, though. So how many colors were there? I don't remember now.
So there's the black line work, and then I use a gray tone for shadows to add depth, basically, and then there's just 2 shades of purple. So it's the same color, the same Pantone, but it's just at I think like 90% and 50% or 40% or something like that.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now.
Yeah, yeah. So it's pretty simple, and I wanted to keep it simple because I feel like when I'm reading comics, I appreciate like a limited color palette or black and white comics. I feel like it's just easier to read because a lot of times when there's like really detailed color, I'll get distracted by it. Like I'll be like, oh wait, this illustration is so complex. It's like it can stand completely on its own outside of this comic, and then I'm thinking about that and not thinking about the story anymore. I feel like I like comics that are that function like in a utilitarian way, I guess, where you're able to just move from panel to panel, I guess.
Although, I mean, those full page kind of splash page shots are pretty complex sometimes. I'm looking at the one where Sparks is kind of walking through town, and there are all these other people around doing different things.
Right.
And it can take some time examining all of this.
Right, but I think like taking time in the illustrations is okay. It's just like when you're getting pulled out of the story, because, for example, like the page you're talking about in terms of pacing in the story, like you might stop there and then like focus on the world. I think so that would be spending time. I mean, hopefully, the intention is spending time on that page, taking a little more time to spend time in the world of Avalon, I guess, rather than like in the world of, oh, that's a nice illustration.
Right. Well, yeah, maybe talk about the world building here, because you did a lot that I appreciated in terms of building this world all the way through the story. Even towards the end, you were still building the world, which I found interesting.
Oh, cool, thanks. Like, are you talking about like the TV pages and everything?
Well, there's that, and then like even towards the end when Sparks is working with the Wraith people, and they're moving in a car, and you see like a page or so of them like on this freeway.
Oh, right. Yeah, I think I really like inventing aspects of the world, and so I didn't want to stop doing that in the last chapter, just to close up the story, I guess. And I do think, because I have found that in books, in especially like sci-fi books too, comics, where I'll read like the first chapter and I'll think like, oh, this is so cool, there's so much detail in the world, and then like after that first chapter, it's talking heads for the rest of the book. And that's always been like a disappointment to me, because that's one of the coolest things about drawing sci-fi, is being able to draw all the wires and gadgets and like weird stuff that obviously can't or doesn't exist in our world. So yeah, I wanted to keep that going throughout.
I see. Well, do you think our world is moving towards being the world of Sparks?
I think our world is the world of Sparks. So I guess no, like this is not this exactly is not going to happen, but I would like to think this is maybe a parallel.
Okay, because I mean, there are, like especially the prosthetic limbs that war veterans are getting sometimes, right, or whatever. I mean, we're getting a little bit of what's happening in this story, but it's in the story it's moved much beyond the current day. I
mean, if you're describing like the science fiction aspects of Sparks, like on paper, most of that stuff exists today. Mm-hmm. Like hacking and cybernetics, virtual reality. I mean, it doesn't exist to this extent, obviously. But yeah, I think that yeah. So in terms also, with all cyberpunk, it's kind of like a parallel to whatever's happening in the day. And the reason that I said I don't think that we're moving in this direction is because, like I was saying earlier, I think this is the past's future. Like, this is the future from the 80s or 90s. And yeah, I think like the future here is going to be a lot, in terms of aesthetically, it's going to be a lot cleaner. In terms of like the way the technology looks and everything, like there won't be wires and everything. Like look at Apple products and stuff, But yeah, I mean, politically, yeah, this is definitely the direction we're going, especially with the current events.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
Okay, what's coming next from you?
Well, I'm working on some mini comics now that I'm going to print myself for some upcoming shows that I'm doing. And then, I have some ideas in the works for longer projects too. So I can't really talk about stuff specifically, but there are things in the works.
Okay.
Yeah. But actually, can I ask, when is this podcast going to air? Do you know?
Yeah, next Monday.
Oh, okay. Then can I plug a Sparks signing that I'm doing at Desert Island Comics in Brooklyn?
Okay.
Which is going to be on Wednesday, January 11th, from 7 to 9. And there will be free beer while it lasts. So come by and get your book signed. Oh, also, I'm going to have, I'm making little data books. So basically like a little zine with character bios and stuff that you can get when you get a copy of Sparks. So I'll have those as well.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Sparks is published by Nobrow. Don't forget there's more of the interview if you're a supporter of this show at patreon.com/deconcomics. Write us at mail@deconstructingcomics.com or look us up on Patreon, Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, and YouTube. All our social media links can be found on the right sidebar at deconstructingcomics.com. Also, please give us a review on iTunes or Stitcher. Our theme is from bensound.com. Last Thursday on To the Bat Poles, Mad Hatter and the Death of Camp. In his second appearance, David Wayne plays the Mad Hatter in an overly campy way, and the show is upping the ante in multiple ways. How much is too much? Look up To the Bat Poles wherever you find your podcasts or at tothebatpoles.libsyn.com. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and Mulele and I will critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com, and please try to keep it to about 30 pages. A new Critiquing Comics is coming up this Thursday. Next week on this show, Emmett Okuna interviews Neil Curtis from the University of Auckland in New Zealand. Recently at the Australian Centre for the Moving Image in Melbourne, Neil presented the paper Captain America, Patriotism, Nationalism, Fascism. So Emmett will be talking with him about that next week. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.